The sky hung dull over the village of Castelo, its clouds thin and hesitant, as if they too feared to linger. Dust clung to every wall, every leaf, every footstep, and the once proud wells had long been choked with silence. The fields, where millet once danced golden in the wind, now lay flat and cracked like forgotten plates. Crops had died. Livestock birthed still. And no rain had touched the village in 9 moons. So when Mireia stepped out of her clay hut one morning, the sun already sharpening its blades, the villagers turned to stare, not with kindness but with suspicion. "There she goes," whispered old Mama Dida, her blind eyes milky but her mouth sharp. "The shadow girl. The drought walks with her," hissed a young mother clutching a child to her chest. Mireia kept her eyes low. She didn't understand when the stares had turned into glares, or when her once playmates had started whispering. Only that since her mother died and her father disappeared on a trading journey to the west, nothing had felt like home anymore. The stepmother didn't help. Luma was a tall, bitter woman with eyes like cooled ash. She had arrived after Mireia's mother's burial, claiming to have been sent by a cousin of her father. Within a week she had moved into the house. Within a month she had changed everything. "You must sleep in the shed," she'd said one night, yanking Mireia's mat out of the main hut. "Your spirit is too loud. You call things." And Mireia had tried to believe it wasn't true. That it wasn't her fault that every time she touched the soil, it seemed to squirm. That the shadows on her walls sometimes whispered. That her dreams came with visions of rain, but always woke her to dust. But this morning was different. The men came with ropes. The village elder walked beside them in silence, holding a carved staff. And behind him, the stepmother, wrapped in mourning cloth, as though someone had died. "The council has spoken." Luma's voice rang over the silent crowd. "The girl is cursed." "I'm not," Mireia whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't." "She was born with a black mark under her left foot," Luma shouted. "Didn't her mother die choking on salt water? Didn't her father vanish into the dry hills the same month she began humming at night?" "They're gone because you told them to go," someone muttered in the crowd. "You speak to the wind. She sings to the well and it turns dry," another voice added. Mireia shook her head, heart rattling in her chest. "Please? I only sing to remember. I only hum to stay awake at night." No one answered. The rope was brought forward. She didn't resist when her wrists were bound. There was nothing to say. Her throat felt full of stones. They led her to the outskirts of Castelo, where the cliffs opened to a jagged sinkhole, the kind of place parents warn children never to approach. It was known as Khatun, the earth's broken mouth. Legend said it led to the underworld, where old kings and cursed warriors were banished to wait out eternity. A rope was thrown down into the void. A woven harness lowered. The villagers stood silent, watching as Mireia's arms were fastened and her feet tied. Only one person moved. Her grandmother, stooped with age and mostly ignored by the others, shuffled forward through the crowd. She placed a hand on Mireia's arm, and when she leaned in to whisper goodbye, her old fingers pressed something into Mireia's palm. "Never drop this," she murmured. "Even when the dark grows teeth." Before Mireia could open her hand or respond, the harness lifted slightly. The descent had begun. The crowd leaned forward in solemn silence, their faces a wall of cold stares. Luma stood tall, arms crossed, eyes gleaming. The light thinned as Mireia went down, dust swirling around her like ashes. She opened her palm. Inside was a stone, no bigger than a thumbprint, glowing faintly with bluish light. It was warm. Her breath quickened. "Grandma," she whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the pit. Then without warning the rope jerked once, and went slack. Above her she heard a single voice cry out. "Cut it. Let the earth take her." The scream that tore from Mireia's throat echoed up the shaft, bounced off stone and bone, and reached the surface like a dying bird call. No one answered. The dust settled. The villagers turned away. And the mouth of Khatun closed around her like a grave. At first there was only falling. The weightlessness. The cold rush of air against her skin. The rope had given way, and the harness twisted as Mireia dropped, eyes clenched shut, the glowing stone clenched tighter in her palm. Then, impact. Not hard, but thick, as if the earth had reached up with arms of loam and caught her gently. Her breath was gone. She lay there in darkness, unmoving. Dust clung to her lips, seeped into her ears, settled into the folds of her dress. Her fingers trembled, but the stone in her palm still pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of something not quite dead. She opened her eyes. Darkness. But not full. Thin tendrils of light glowed faintly from the walls, threads of moss that curled like vines across smooth stone. They shimmered green-blue, like starlight seen through water. Above her, the shaft she'd fallen from had closed into a pinprick, so distant it looked like a forgotten sun. Mireia sat up slowly, her joints aching, her throat raw. She pressed a hand to the floor beneath her and felt warmth. Not from heat but memory. The stone slabs felt old. Older than anything she'd touched before. They pulsed faintly beneath her palm like they were remembering something, or waiting to. She tried to stand, but the ground shifted under her, gently, like a sleeping creature rolling in its dream. A tunnel yawned before her, the entrance ribbed with thick roots that quivered faintly as though tasting the air. "Where am I?" she whispered. No answer. Just a soft rustle from somewhere deeper. A breath not hers. She took a step forward. Her lungs burned. The air was thin here, like sipping air through cloth. She pressed her cheek to the nearest wall, and warm moisture kissed her skin. A faint crack. A vein of wind. She leaned against it, breathing in shallow pulls. It was just enough. She moved deeper. The tunnel branched, turned, curved upon itself. Some halls were narrow, so tight she had to crawl. Others opened into vast pockets, domes of stone strung with the same glowing moss, their ceilings high and wet with condensation. Pools shimmered silently at the center of many of them, black water without ripples. One she passed bubbled slightly when she came near, as if it recognized her. On one wall she saw carvings. Smooth as bone, ancient and beautiful, images of a woman with a high crown, arms outstretched, standing between two worlds. Above, a blazing sun, below, a twisted root. Around her, people bowed, wept, bled. Mireia reached out and touched the figure's face. Something warm pulsed beneath it. The stone whispered. A sound, not a voice. Just breath. Or memory. Mireia stepped back. She walked for hours. Or days. Time was no longer whole here. Her hunger gnawed but didn't scream. Her thirst was sharper, until she pressed her lips to a dripping wall and tasted metal and moss. Her song came next. At first it was just a hum. Something to keep the fear back. A tune her mother once sang when lightning cracked too close. Then words. Soft. Broken. Her voice echoed oddly, not just bouncing but changing, like someone humming back with a different mood. She paused. Hello. Her voice didn't return. Then, a breath. A scuffle. Bare feet on stone. She whirled around. From one of the side tunnels, a figure emerged, small, lean, and covered in soil. At first she thought it was a child. Then the figure lifted its face toward her and she saw, not a child. Not old either. A boy, maybe 15 or 16, with skin the color of river mud and long fingers curled protectively around a wooden stick. His eyes were strange. One clouded white. The other squinting as if unused to light, even this dim, mossy kind. Are you? Mireia began. He sniffed the air, then pointed at her hand. The stone, he said. His voice was hoarse but calm. It woke things. She looked down. The glowing stone her grandmother had given her now throbbed brighter, like it had found kin in the tunnel walls. Who are you? She asked. The boy tilted his head. Colo. You live down here? I was born here. He said it like someone stating the shape of the moon. I've never been above. You smell like fire. Like sky. Mireia blinked. You've never seen the sky? Colo moved past her toward one of the walls. He pressed his palm to a spiral carving, and the stone shifted slightly, revealing a thin tunnel. The air from within smelled fresher, if only by a little. You'll die if you stay here alone, he said without looking at her. Follow me. If the roots haven't eaten yet. She hesitated, then stepped in behind him. Why help me? Colo glanced over his shoulder, his half-blind eyes unreadable. Because you sing. And the echoes sing back. They moved into the new tunnel, swallowed again by the shifting dark. But this time Mireia's fear was quieter. The breathless silence around her now carried a heartbeat not her own. She wasn't alone. And something ancient had been listening. The tunnel opened into a chamber that stole Mireia's breath. It wasn't the size, though it was immense, its ceiling lost in shadows and hung with trailing roots like chandeliers of old bone. Nor was it the soft golden glow that pulsed from the walls, or the way the air seemed warmer, more forgiving, almost sacred. It was what stood at the heart of the room that made her stop walking and fall silent. A statue taller than any man, carved into the center pillar of the chamber. She was beautiful, not in the delicate way of painted queens from stories, but in the way storms are beautiful. Her stone skin was dark, textured like lava cooled too quickly. Her nose was broad, her lips full and stern. She wore no smile. Her gaze carved through time, eyes staring forward as though waiting for someone she already knew would come. Her hands were stretched out, palms facing upward, and on her bare feet, were small chisel marks that had once been painted with color. And on the inside of the left foot, smooth from time but still clearly visible, was a raised crescent-shaped mark. Mireia stepped closer slowly. Her body trembled. She didn't speak. She bent down, untied the straps of her sandal, and lifted her own foot. There. The same mark. Same shape. Same position. Same twist in the center. A crescent scar she had been born with. One her stepmother had tried to scrub away with ash water and bark oil. One the village priest had once said was a twin to something better left buried. Her breath came fast. Mireia looked up at Colo, who stood a respectful distance back, watching her with calm intensity. Who is this? Ezra, he said. Queen of Two Skies. She ruled the realm before the first stories were ever carved. Before the drums knew rhythm. Mireia turned slowly, her voice tight. I've never heard her name. No one speaks of her. They don't dare. Colo walked forward and placed a hand on the carved hem of the statue's robe. She was betrayed. Not killed, worse. Buried. Erased. Her palace sunk into the deep roots. Her name stricken from tablets. Her bloodline hunted. Mireia stared up at the stony face. Why? She refused to make the sky people bow. She built her second kingdom below, where the roots remember what the leaves forget. They said she loved the dark too much. That she listened too long to the ancestors. And so they buried her? No, Colo's voice dipped. Her own kin betrayed her. A sister. A lover. A priest? No one remembers clearly. Only that the ones who feared her light called her dark. And so they made her a villain. Mireia took a slow step forward. The drought, the whispers, me being cursed. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was to bring me here. Colo looked at her then, not like a stranger, but like someone reading a message carved long ago into the bones of the world. I knew it when you sang. Your voice turned the roots quiet. Mireia raised the glowing stone in her hand and brought it close to the statue. The air changed. The moss around them dimmed. The temperature dropped. A hum started, low, from the floor, from the walls, from inside her bones. The stone in her hand grew hot, then blistering. She gasped and almost dropped it, but her fingers wouldn't open. As the stone's light touched the statue's chest, something impossible happened. The statue wept. Not water. Not oil. Tears of soft, slow magma leaked from the carved eyes. Glowing orange, dripping silently down the cheeks. The tears didn't steam. They didn't hiss. They simply slid, sorrowful and smooth, as though they had waited centuries for someone to arrive and release them. Mireia stepped back in awe. Her heart raced. I didn't do anything, she whispered. Yes, you did, Colo said gently. You came. The molten tears slid down the statue's jaw and pooled into grooves in the stone floor, grooves she hadn't noticed before. They formed a spiral, a map perhaps, or a sigil. And in the center of that spiral, something began to rise. A pedestal. Stone, rounded, and sealed tight with root fibers braided like hair. Mireia reached for it, but Colo caught her wrist. Not yet, he said. You must learn first. This place is waking. And it's not only you who will hear it. Mireia looked back at the statue. The face of Queen Ezra stared forward, eyes now streaked with light. And Mireia felt it, not fear, not confusion, but belonging. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't cursed. She was claimed. The spiral groove had stopped glowing 2 days ago. Since then, the tunnels had grown colder, tighter, more reluctant to let them pass. The moss dimmed when Mireia approached, as if uncertain now that the tears had fallen. Even Colo had grown quieter, pausing often, sniffing the air or laying his ear to the stone. There are places, he finally said after a long stretch of silence, that haven't breathed in centuries. Not even the roots go there. Mireia tightened the cloth around her shoulders. Then that's where we need to go. Colo looked at her with one eye pale, the other narrowed. Why do you want to wake what sleeps? Because something down here knows who I am. Knows what I'm meant to become. He didn't argue. But he also didn't smile. They stepped through a jagged breach in one of the ancient murals. It had once shown Queen Ezra standing between two beasts, one made of flame, one of stone. The beast of stone had been clawed away, chipped until its body was little more than suggestion. Now Mireia and Colo walked into its shadow. The tunnel beyond was unlike the others, angular, carved with straight, deliberate lines. The walls weren't moist with moss or humming with root song. They were dry, smooth, silent, and warm. Mireia felt the temperature rise with every step, though no flame flickered. The air shimmered faintly. Her glowing stone pulsed in her pocket but gave no comfort. Even Kolo's steps faltered now. They reached a vast chamber sealed with a great slab of dark obsidian. Symbols writhed faintly on its surface, shifting when stared at too long. At its center, carved deep, was a claw print, impossibly large, inhuman, and etched with ridges like teeth. As Mireia stepped closer, the ground rumbled. A sound echoed through the chamber, low like breath dragging over bone. Then a voice, not spoken aloud but within her, felt in the ribs. Who dares walk the spine of betrayal? Smoke began to pour from the seams of the slab, curling like fingers in the air. Then the obsidian began to crack, not breaking, unfolding. And through it stepped the guardian. It was shaped like a panther, but impossibly large, its body made of layered black stone and trailing wisps of smoke that curled off its limbs like incense. Its eyes were two burning pits. Its claws scraped with a sound like dry bones tumbling down a mountain. Kolo fell to his knees without hesitation. Mireia stood frozen. The guardian's head tilted, studying her. You carry the mark. She nodded, throat dry. Queen Ezra's blood. The guardian circled her once, slow and silent. Blood is not truth, it hissed. Many bore it. Many broke it. One among you carries the scent of betrayal. Mireia's hand went to her chest. I didn't betray her, she said softly. The guardian stopped in front of her. Smoke curled up around her legs. Then answer. Its voice deepened. The ground trembled with each word. Dig what's hidden but bury what you love. What becomes of the one who cannot choose? The riddle hung in the air like a blade. Mireia blinked, thinking fast. Dig what's hidden, truth perhaps? Or past? But bury what you love? Would she have to give something up to reveal it? She didn't answer yet. She asked instead, is this a warning, or a prophecy? The guardian stepped closer, so near she could feel the heat radiating off its breath. It is a promise. A hiss of wind circled the room, and with it came a vision, a flicker of memory not her own. A woman in white robes lifting a baby. A younger version of Luma, her stepmother, reaching with bloodied hands. A blade hidden in a cradle. Screams. The baby taken. Mireia gasped. The guardian spoke again. Your stepmother carries the line of those who betrayed Ezra. She is the descendant of the priestess who opened the gates. She has tasted Ezra's bloodline before, and would do so again. Mireia backed away slowly, heart hammering. All this time, Luma hadn't just feared her. She had known. Known who Mireia was. Known what she could become. That's why she'd called her cursed. Why she'd ensured the village turned its back. It hadn't been fear. It had been preemptive war. The guardian stepped aside, smoke parting like a curtain behind it. A path revealed itself, one lined in dark carvings of burial, of ritual, of stolen crowns. Walk it if you wish, the guardian said. But know this, digging up the truth demands payment. And it may be your heart. Mireia swallowed hard. Then she stepped forward. And the smoke swallowed her whole. The tunnel behind her vanished as soon as Mireia stepped through the veil of smoke. The ground felt colder here, dry and brittle beneath her bare feet. There was no moss to glow, no roots to whisper. Only stillness, ancient and oppressive. The silence rang louder than any scream. She walked forward slowly, clutching the stone in her hand. Its glow dimmed now, no longer leading, only pulsing like a dull heartbeat. The air smelled of dust and old marrow. Then the passage widened. Mireia emerged into a cavern that was not just large, it was endless. Vast rows of low pillars stretched in both directions, carved with names that time had almost erased. Bones lay stacked in careful patterns along the walls, some arranged in symbols too ancient to read. Her breath caught when she realized that each pillar held not offerings or tools, but small, delicate skulls. Child-sized. Row upon row, ringed with small carvings, bracelets, and cloth bands woven from hair. It was not a tomb. It was a cemetery made of innocence. Her foot nudged something. She looked down and saw a tiny femur smoothed with age. Beside it, a circlet of twisted gold and bone. She knelt, carefully brushing the dust away, revealing a small skeleton curled into itself as if trying to sleep through history. Upon its skull rested a tiny crown, half collapsed from weight and time. She stared at it for a long time, unmoving. This was not a grave of traitors. This was a massacre. The crown told her that. These were not peasants, not rebels, they were royal. Young heirs. The Queen's children. Ezra's bloodline. Mireia stood, fists clenched. Her jaw ached from how hard she bit back the rising grief. She walked deeper. Her footsteps echoed in the vast chamber, each step a soft protest against what had been done. And then she saw the walls. Hundreds of feet high, the cavern walls bore carvings, no longer just symbols but prophecies. Images of stars falling, of women crowned in shadow, of fire climbing out of the earth. Figures danced in the margins, girls with spears, boys with wings, elders holding broken sons. Her eyes swept across them until she stopped. There, etched near the base of the wall, was a new carving. Not fresh but newer than the rest. Less faded. Less cracked. It showed a girl, eyes closed, falling from the sky into the open mouth of the earth. Her hair curled like flame, and in her right hand she held a small glowing stone. Beneath her image one name. Mireia. Her breath caught. She stepped closer, hand trembling as she reached for the carved name. Someone had known. Long before she was born, long before she'd sung to the well, someone had carved her place into the stone of fate. It had never been about her being cursed. It had been about someone trying to interrupt the prophecy. Stop her from fulfilling it. Hide her away underground, hoping the stone would never glow again. Her chest burned, not with fear, not even with confusion anymore, but with rage. "I won't let you stay forgotten," she whispered to the bones around her. "Not one of you." She looked up at the pillars, the tiny skulls with their beaded necklaces, their cracked crowns and faded cloth. "They buried your names. But I will make the world say them again." For the first time in days her voice didn't waver. She sang. Softly. No words, just breath and hum. A lullaby once whispered to her when she was ill, when her mother still held her close and the world was kind. She sang to the bones. To the carved walls. To the dust that still remembered laughter. Her voice echoed, not hollow, but warm like wind in a house long locked. And then, a voice answered. It didn't echo from the walls. It didn't come from Colo or any tunnel behind her. It came from just behind her. Full, gentle, familiar. That song, your mother sang that. Mireia froze. The air shifted. The dust behind her stirred. Slowly she turned. One of the skulls, an adult's, had fallen from a broken pillar and now rested upright on the stone floor. Around it, bones formed the rough shape of a man kneeling. And from it, a voice came. Not loud. Not hollow. Real. "You always hummed it as a baby," the voice said. "Even before your first word." She dropped to her knees. Who are you?" The skull tilted slightly. Its jaw moved with no muscle. Just intention. "Mireia. I'm sorry I didn't come back." Her heart stopped. She knew that voice. The dreams. The stories. The deep, warm tone that used to hum back at her from memory. "Baba?" Her voice cracked like dry leaves. The skull was still. But the voice came again. "They told me you died. That Ezra's line had been wiped out. I tried to run. Tried to hide the truth. But they found me." She crawled forward on shaking limbs, tears burning. "You were the heir, weren't you?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you fight?" "I did. But I wasn't strong enough." The voice dimmed, sorrowful. "You are." Mireia pressed her hands to her chest. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." The bones shifted slightly. A final breath. "Finish the song. Dig what's hidden. Bury what you love, only so others may live." Silence returned. The skull fell still. Mireia wept beside it, head bowed. When she finally rose, she took the broken crown from the child's skeleton and placed it gently at the base of the wall, beneath her own carved name. Then she turned. And walked back into the tunnels, the rage in her heart now sharpened into something sacred. Not revenge. But remembrance. Mireia returned to the spiral chamber beneath Queen Ezra's statue with her fists clenched and her jaw locked. The glowing stone no longer flickered in her palm, it blazed. The tears of the queen had dried into thin amber lines down the statue's face, and the pedestal in the center had risen higher, the root braids across its surface coiling tighter like muscle waiting to contract. Colo stood beside it, silent, his shadow long in the golden glow. "You saw them," he said quietly. "I saw everything," Mireia replied, her voice hoarse from grief. "And I remember." She walked past him without hesitation and laid her hand on the stone lid. Her touch sent a soft hum into the air, and the root braids began to glow, then pull apart, strand by strand, revealing a hollow groove beneath the pedestal. Dust drifted upward as the chamber exhaled for the first time in ages. Inside the groove was an old spade. The wood was blackened with time, the blade made of some silvery bone metal that shimmered faintly under the light. She took it in her hands and stepped toward the far side of the chamber, where the moss grew in a perfect circle across the stone floor. Kolo stayed behind. That part of the floor was never meant to be walked. The roots won't move until they taste something true. Mireia nodded, took a deep breath and dug. The first slice broke through moss and thin crust. The roots hissed slightly, then twitched. She struck again. And again. With each cut, memories surfaced. The second shovelful reminded her of her mother's voice, quiet but strong, singing her to sleep with lullabies made of water and wind. The third brought the day her father rode off with trade goods strapped to his camel, smiling down at her, promising he'd return before the rains. The fourth, the day the rains never came. The fifth, the first slap from Luma, when she'd asked too many questions about the old stories. Each strike into the dirt was not just labor but grief unearthed. The roots began to quiver around her feet, then retract slowly, curling back like hands opening. The moss peeled away from the circle, revealing a disk of polished stone beneath. She dropped to her knees and brushed it clean. Carved into the surface was a seal, Queen Ezra's sigil, ringed by script Mireia couldn't read, but somehow understood. Only blood that remembers may pass. She placed her hand on it. Nothing. The stone stayed silent. Cold. Her heart sank. "What else do you want from me?" she whispered. "I've seen the children. I've heard my father's bones speak. I've given you my voice, my hands, my song." Still nothing. The silence pressed harder. Even the light seemed to dim. Then she remembered the guardian's words. "Dig what's hidden. Bury what you love." She sat back, trembling. Bury what you love. And something inside her cracked. Tears came, not like before, not of fear or helplessness, but of release. The last remnants of the girl who believed she could be safe if she just stayed quiet. The girl who thought exile was the worst thing that could happen. Now she knew better. She cried, for the lullaby she would never hear again. For her father's voice, now just echoes in bone. For the royal children whose names no one would ever sing. And for the tiny part of her that still wanted to be held. The tears hit the seal. And it pulsed. A thin crack opened at its center, then widened. The roots surrounding the chamber retracted all at once, not in fear but in offering. The stone disc slid back with a slow groan, revealing a spiral staircase beneath, wrapped in carved stone and lined with golden light veins that pulsed softly, like veins beneath skin. The air that rose from below was warmer than anything she had felt down here, not the heat of death or lava, but the breath of a place waiting to be returned to light. Kolo stepped beside her, staring in awe. "You did it," he murmured. She looked down the staircase. "No. We did." She stood, eyes wet but calm, and held the spade close to her chest. "Now," she said, "we go up." And together they began to climb, step by step, toward the truth buried not in stone, but in silence, ready to shatter. The first breath of surface air struck Mireia like a wave of forgotten memory. It was heavier, scented with dew and the faint perfume of night-blooming flowers. She stood just beneath the edge of a stone threshold, half concealed by the twisted arch of a long-forgotten root tunnel, staring out at the gardens of the royal palace, alive, pristine, and soaked in moonlight. She was no longer the girl who had been dropped into the pit. Her dress was torn and dust-stained, but the glowing moss from below clung to her shoulders and sleeves like embroidery made of stars. Around her brow rested the small, delicate crown once cradled by the bones of the royal child, the skeletal crown. It looked like silver etched with ash, too old to shine, yet unmistakably regal. She did not wear it for beauty. She wore it so no one could deny who she came to represent. Beside her, Kolo crouched low, eyes squinting at the torches that flamed across the courtyard walls. "It's too loud here," he whispered. "The ground doesn't hum." "It will," Mireia said. "Soon." She stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate. As her bare feet met polished marble, guards turned sharply. Their spears raised. But their faces faltered. She was not a beggar. Not a common girl. The moss glowed. The crown glinted. Her eyes did not flicker with fear. They did not stop her. Music and laughter spilled from the palace's great hall. Through tall archways and wide-open doors, Mireia saw nobles swaying to harp strings, platters of roasted meat laid out like bounty, goblets lifted in golden hands. At the center of the dais sat the royal advisor and his newly named consort, Lady Luma, draped in green silk, her silver necklace thick with stones. Mireia's voice rang through the feast. "Do you still taste power, Luma? Even with blood on your tongue?" The music stopped. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. Goblets clinked against the table, hands frozen mid-toast. Luma's smile stiffened. "Mireia," she said with false sweetness. I see the earth did not keep what it was given. Mireia stepped fully into the hall. Her glow filled the chamber like dawn through broken shutters. The nobles fell silent. A few leaned away, recognizing her. Others whispered, confused. You banished me, Mireia said, voice steady. Told them I was cursed. Told them I brought drought. You lied. A nervous chuckle rolled through the crowd. She's a poor girl dressed in moss, said one man. Probably mad from hunger. She wears a crown taken from a grave, said another. Mireia turned to the crowd. Yes, a grave. One of hundreds below your feet. Your history is built on bones. Your throne sits atop skulls. Gasp. Scoffs. Someone spat. Luma stood, expression tight, eyes narrowing. She's mad, she declared. The girl wandered into the cliffs and returned with stories. She is not of Ezra's line. She is not. The earth growled. A deep rumble shook the floor beneath their slippers. The torches flickered. Moss spilled from the high corners of the hall. Then came the roots, rising from the cracks in the stone, unfurling like fingers. They curled up along the walls, twisting into patterns, scraping off plaster, splitting open painted murals. And behind the paint, the truth. Old murals long buried by fresh coats were revealed in peeling fragments. A woman with dark skin and coiled hair. The same crown Mireia wore. Queen Ezra, seated on a throne of roots and flame. Her face had been scrubbed out generations ago. But the roots made it bloom again in lines of living green. The nobles shrank back in fear. Some stumbled from their chairs. Others stared, mouths open. Stop this, Luma cried, but her voice shook. These are parlor tricks. You knew who I was, Mireia said, turning toward her. The day I was born. You knew what the mark on my foot meant. You buried me before the earth could speak. Luma raised a hand, not in defense but to summon the guards. None moved. And then, from the far corner of the hall, an old woman stepped forward. Bent with age, face lined with rivers of time, her shawl faded but her posture upright. It was Mireia's grandmother. Enough, the woman said, her voice soft but thunderous. I buried a daughter once. I will not bury a granddaughter. The crowd turned to her. Luma's jaw tightened. She's mad too. No, Mireia stepped beside her. She's Ezra's daughter. That makes me her blood. Her heir. Gasps scattered through the crowd like thrown sand. A noble woman dropped her goblet. The grandmother reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded cloth, old and stained but unmistakable. Ezra's royal sigil was embroidered into it. Twisted root, flaming sun. Ezra had a child before the fall, she said. And that child was me. She turned to Mireia. And you, Mireia, are what the earth has waited for. You are the root that broke the stone. Luma took a step back. The moss crept up her ankles. The roots began to twist around her chair, pulling at its legs. No, she whispered. Yes, Mireia answered. The hall fell silent. Outside, thunder rumbled though no storm brewed. And in the center of the palace built on betrayal, Mireia stood glowing with moss and memory, the rightful heir risen from the grave they had dug for her. Not dead. Not broken. Returned. The sun rose heavy and solemn the morning of the trial. It climbed not with warmth, but with judgment, casting long gold rays across the palace courtyard where the stone seats of the tribal council had been arranged in a great circle. From the peaks, the riverlands, and the desert edges, elders had come in cloaks of ash, beads, bark, and feather, each one bearing the mark of their region and the weight of their people's eyes. For the first time in generations, they had been summoned not by the crown, but by the earth itself. Mireia stood in the center of the circle, the moss still faintly glowing along her sleeves, the crown of bone light still nestled in her coils. She no longer trembled when others looked at her. Now she made them look, not with fear but with unflinching demand. At her feet, wrapped in cloth and reverence, lay the remains of the royal children, the skulls of Ezra's bloodline, carried carefully from the city of skulls beneath the palace. The roots that had risen days before now lay dormant but visible. No one had dared remove them. On a carved stone table nearby sat the stone chalice of truth, a relic known to the elders as legend, feared as curse. Once a cup carved from the ribs of a fire-born beast, its contents were no more than water when viewed by the innocent. But to the guilty, it turned to ash and truth burned the tongue. Mireia's grandmother, wrapped in the faded shawl of Queen Ezra's line, stood beside her. The council's eldest member, an old man from the cliff tribes, spoke first. His voice cracked like a landslide. Why summon us, girl of roots and ruin? What claim do you place before this fire? Mireia stepped forward. I bring proof of betrayal, she said. Not only of a queen but of memory. Of truth buried by silence. I stand not for vengeance but for the voices beneath our feet, children whose names were swallowed so that others could rise. She unwrapped the cloth. The air shifted. Gasps and murmurs spread through the gathered elders as they gazed upon the tiny crowns, the small bones carved with royal markings. Many turned away covering their mouths. Others reached out as if to bless what they once thought myth. These, Mireia said, were murdered when Queen Ezra fell. They were her heirs. My blood. And their bones have sung to me since the day you all left them behind. She turned then slowly toward the figure brought forth in chains, Luma. Her green silks had been stripped for trial robes, plain and pale. Her eyes darted between the elders and the skulls, but her mouth remained firm. You claimed I was cursed, Mireia said. That I brought drought. But it was you who poisoned the well of truth. Who hunted Ezra's line in secret. You feared what I would awaken. Luma raised her chin. And what have you awakened? Ghosts and dirt? I did what your father was too weak to do. I protected the world from a queen who whispered to shadows. Mireia turned to the elders. Then let the chalice decide. Kolo stepped forward, carrying the chalice carefully in both hands. His eyes were steady now, his posture regal. Something had changed in him. The way he walked. The way the wind did not seem to touch him. Luma sneered. Let the mole boy bring your cursed drink then? She was handed the chalice. It looked like ordinary water. She raised it to her lips with a scoff. But the moment it touched her tongue she choked. Dropped to her knees. The liquid turned black, thick as tar, and smoke curled from her mouth. Her voice cracked as truth forced itself free. I betrayed her, she screamed. I held the knife at her belly. I whispered lies into the ears of the court. I offered the priestess silver to change the records. I buried the children and told the story backward. The crowd gasped. Some elders rose in shock. Others turned away in shame. Luma wept now, real and shaking. I only wanted to survive. We all wanted to survive. The chalice clattered from her hands and she collapsed, trembling, no longer defiant, only small. Silence. Then the cliff elder spoke. You have opened a wound we tried to scar over. Mireia nodded. And it must stay open until the truth is healed. Around her, the people began to weep. Not from guilt, but from the shame of forgetting. The shame of convenience. Of letting history be reshaped because it was easier than standing in the fire. Then Kolo stepped forward. Mireia turned to him, surprised to see a hush fall over the council as he pulled a scroll from the lining of his tunic. My name is Kolo, son of the root chamber, he said. But before that my name was Kolowan, son of Ezra's hidden heir. My family was cast below when the bloodline split. We were told to guard what remained. He stepped beside Mireia. I was born underground, yes, but not to silence. To prophecy. One that said when the two bloodlines met again, one from the dust, one from the dark, Ezra's fire would rise. Mireia's eyes met his. Everything within her fell still. The dreams, the songs, the stone that never left her hand, all of it had pulled them to this moment. Two halves. One root. The elders bowed their heads. And so did the sun. The coronation was not held in the palace. It was held at the mouth of the root chamber, where stone kissed moss and the first staircase of the underworld opened into sunlight. The ground there was neither royal nor sacred, but both. The earth was marked by story now, by truth reclaimed, and by bones turned to memory. Mireia stood at its center, bare feet on soil that had once swallowed her whole. Her gown was stitched from both worlds, the upper dyed in bright reds and ochres of the desert sun, the lower woven from underground moss and root threads that shimmered in the light. Around her brow rested a new crown, cast from melted royal tokens and bone, reforged to honor both sky and shadow. In her hand she carried no scepter, but the same glowing stone that had never left her palm since the day she fell. Drums pulsed low from the palace walls. From underground, chimes made of root bones sang softly in reply. The two peoples gathered as one. Those from above had faces painted in ash and gold, their feet wrapped in woven reed. They carried flowers, not weapons. Those from below stood quietly, blinking at the light, their eyes unused to sky, but their backs strong. For the first time in living memory they looked at each other not with suspicion, but with recognition. The elder from the cliff tribe stepped forward with a bowl of crushed river clay and marked Mireia's forehead. From the dust you rose, he said. Then Mireia's grandmother, Queen Ezra's last daughter, lifted a bowl of moss water and marked Mireia's hands. From the roots you remembered, she whispered. Finally Kolo stepped before her, holding a torch carved from a petrified root. He touched it to the ground and a small flame sparked, neither fire nor light but something older. Adjoining. To the queen of the twin realms, he said. And the people, all of them, bowed. The underground gates behind Mireia groaned open fully. Roots peeled back. The staircase widened. Children ran first as they always do. The ones born in stone raced to feel the sunlight, squealing as it touched their cheeks. The ones from above dashed toward the tunnel, reaching for the glowflies that rose like sparks in the mossy dark. They met in the middle, laughter mixing with wonder. No guards stood between them. No borders. Only awe. Mireia watched in silence, her eyes shining but dry. She knelt and touched the ground with both palms, pressing the stone to the soil. You buried me, she whispered, her voice steady and full, but forgot I was seed. The earth answered, not with words, but with a single gust of warm wind that swept through the gates, rattling the beads in her hair, making the moss along the walls tremble like breath. Beside her, Colo crouched, his hand covering hers. And now, he murmured, you bloom. Above and below, fireflies rose and stars began to bloom in the sky. And the kingdom, long divided by stone and silence, breathed as one. Years passed. Seasons turned like soft drums in the distance, and the wound between the two realms healed into something deeper than unity. It became song. Mireia no longer wore a crown every day. Instead, she wore earth-stained robes and carried a small satchel of carved bone tablets, each etched with lessons pulled from stone, not scroll. Her throne had long been moved from the palace to the root circle, a place where sun filtered through old trees and roots curled beneath the soil, still humming with memory. She taught not with commands but with stories. Children sat cross-legged around her, some with moss still clinging to their sleeves, others with dust on their feet, all listening wide-eyed. Above them birds flitted from tree to tree. Below, glowing fireflies blinked patiently at the edges of the reopened staircase. How did you know the roots would speak to you? One child asked, fingers wrapped around a smooth pebble. Mireia smiled, placing her hand gently on the soil beside her. I didn't, she answered. I only knew what silence felt like, and how it changes when you dare to speak back. Some of the children were descendants of those who had once lived above, nobles who once whispered lies about curses and kept their histories tidy. Others were born in the deep, where songs echoed like memory and names were carved in roots instead of stone. Now they learned together. They pressed their ears to the ground and listened for the tremble of truth. They memorized symbols etched in the walls of both palace and cavern, not to control the past but to carry it. Mireia's story, like Ezra's before her, was carved into the palace atrium and mirrored in crystal tunnels below. No longer erased. No longer twisted. She taught them the names of the lost children, each syllable a note in a lullaby that bloomed across generations. Each moon, new parents came to ask for blessings at the gate of joining, the place where sun met soil. There they sang to their infants, not of royalty or victory, but of roots and resilience. Colo, now a teacher in his own right, had planted gardens that grew both above and beneath. His people, the ones who had guarded the truth for so long, walked openly now. Their language mixed into everyday speech, their music played in city squares, their crafts sold alongside palace wares. And Mireia? She had not stopped digging. Only now she unearthed joy. Every month she would return alone to the City of Skulls, now renamed the Memory Hall. There in silence she placed flowers shaped from crystal near the small crowns and whispered, I remember. And the earth always answered with warmth. On the last day of the planting season she stood once more before a crowd, not to command but to sing. Children, elders, and fireflies gathered as she lifted her voice to the sky. Her song was simple. A rhythm of soil. A tune that remembered. And when she finished she looked out at the people of the twin realms, people who had once feared each other, now held by roots and stars. She placed her hand on the ground once more, and said for all to hear. Those who live above must listen to what's buried, because it listens back.